Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Literary Lore. Today, we're continuing our series on Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, specifically chapters 12 through 16. Like most literary works we'll be covering on this channel, it is in the public domain and easily accessible for free with a quick search. I include a link to the novel in the description. So we'll be following the creature's tale for this episode. If you didn't know, Frankenstein's monster is capable of speech, and he'll be explaining how he gained that ability shortly. Now, as you may recall, this creature is hiding in a hovel leaning against the cottage this family is living in. At the moment, he is able to recognize their emotions, but not their words. He can tell they're upset and realizes that as it gets colder, they have less food, a problem he's exacerbated by stealing from them. So to make amends for his theft, he uses his great strength to cut firewood for them, and over several days, finally picks up some words. By great application, however, and after having remained during the space of several revolutions of the moon in my hovel, I discovered the names that were given to some of the most familiar objects of discourse. I learned and applied the words fire, milk, bread, and wood. His first four words are incredibly important. Milk and bread are necessary for the sustaining of life, but wood and fire are connected to comfort as well as survival. In addition, the connection between fire as a symbol and knowledge and wood being a sort of payment to keep the fire going becomes more apparent as he gains more knowledge from the cottagers, while at the same time providing firewood to the cottage. He then learns the terms of family, most importantly, father and son, and he begins to understand familial love. His cottagers help him to understand love, yet also inflicts the pain of loneliness on him. Again, like fire, knowledge provides both a salve and pain equal measure. The creature essentially is stalking this family. He believes that his caring for them will ingratiate himself to them, and that he'll eventually be able to befriend them. So chapter 13 rolls around and introduces Sapphi, a woman Shelley describes as the Arabian. She's romantically attached to Felix, and she inadvertently teaches the concept of romantic love to the creature. She's also Christian, which means she's rejected by those that share her race for her religion, and rejected by those that only see her for her race. She's essentially an outcast in all forms. We'll later discover that Felix had tried to save her father from persecution, and after a fairly generic bout of preventing the two from being wed, she finally is reunited with him. Now, in the midst of their romance, it's explained that because Felix chose to help an innocent person that had been accused, they became outcasts, and his family was exiled from France. This emboldens the creature even more, now that he knows that he has found a home among outcasts. Though again, they have no idea he's there. So, like for instance, when they're teaching Sapphi how to read, the creature just takes that opportunity for himself, and he also learns how to speak and how to read. Now, before we cover the various books he learned from, I want to point out a concept that defines the creature, the other. There are very few stories I have encountered that utilize otherness so well. You see, all of humanity seeks identity. This could be an intentional journey or an impulsive inclination. Either way, everyone has an identity. This is not an inherently bad thing. In fact, it is good for creating bonds with others that share that identity. For instance, as children, we find common interests that serve as the foundation for friendships. Favorite colors, favorite animals, simple things like that. But as we age, our identity coalesces. Our understanding of ourselves becomes a much more concrete, complex thing. If I say, I am Christian, there's an immediate response. The identity will ingratiate those that share the identity while immediately alienating others. Yet still, there is a third group that would ask further probing questions to better solidify what the identity means exactly to me. Now, if I say that I'm Hispanic or Chicano, that creates expectations and questions. If others identify me, they may decide I do not fit their criteria for an identity, and thus I am othered again. If I tell you my pronouns are he, him, not only have I given a clear designation, I have also created several implications about my own beliefs merely by identifying myself. Even more, I may define my self-image by an occupation, a fandom, or a disability. What I use to define myself inherently creates a boundary that insulates me from the world. Now, the concept of the other, again, is not inherently bad. It's how we as primitive humans survive. If I see a sickly, shambling person, I know to avoid them. I don't want to get sick. If a rival tribe is charging at my village, it's not likely I would welcome them. This, of course, leads to other problems, though. In a society where unity is not only possible, but generally preferred, this same inclinations towards seeking a unified identity has led to some of the worst things our species is capable of. Tribalism, nationalism, factionalism, racism, and a litany of other isms come from this reflex that labels the other as bad. Something should not simply be avoided, but removed. Now, I'm sure everyone has an instance in their life where they have been othered, and this is a concept that has inspired entire genres of film. For instance, George Romero's Night of the Living Dead dives into this concept of the other, as do many zombie films. These undead creatures are not like us, and therefore fair game for destruction. Their very existence is a danger to us, and yet they may have once been part of the in-group and were forcibly made into the others. I wrote a whole thesis on this for my master's program that went over this very concept. But returning to the creature, what this video is supposed to be about. What is his identity? What is his name? Could he be considered human? The more the monster learns, the more he reads, the more questions he has about everything, especially himself. The first book he reads is C.F. Volney's Ruins of Empire, which originally was a work from the French Revolution. This is not The Very Hungry Caterpillar. Rather, it's a fairly radical history of humanity. And so the creature's main takeaways are as follows. Was man indeed at once so powerful, so virtuous and magnificent, yet so vicious and base? He appeared at one time a mere scion of the evil principle, and at another as all that can be conceived of noble and godlike. To be a great and virtuous man appeared the highest honor that can befall a sensitive being. To be base and vicious, as many on record have been, appeared the lowest degradation. A condition more abject than that of the blind mole or harmless worm. For a long time I could not conceive how one man could go forth to murder his fellow, or even why there were laws and governments. When I heard details of vice and bloodshed, my wonder ceased, and I turned away with disgust and loathing. So again, the monster loves humanity. He sees all the beauty. But as an outsider, he also is not blind to the hypocrisy of our existence. Yeah, we're capable of great virtue, yet we execute horrid betrayals. There is a hideousness hidden behind the natural beauty. But if these beautiful creatures are imperfect, what does that make him? Of my creation and creator, I was absolutely ignorant. But I knew that I possessed no money, no friends, no kind of property. I was, besides, endued with a figure hideously deformed and loathsome. I was not even of the same nature as man. I was more agile than they and could subsist upon coarser diet. I bore the extremes of heat and cold with less injury to my frame. My stature far exceeded theirs. When I looked around, I saw and heard of none like me. Was I then a monster, a blot upon the earth, from which all men fled and whom all men disowned? The reason I share that direct quote of the creature is because he explains so eloquently the struggle he has. As an indestructible Hulk, his conflict is internal. He is a construct without purpose or place. He continues to share his increasing knowledge and pain. Intelligence breeds isolation. As his identity becomes more complex, he finds himself further separated from his cottagers. Think back to Walton, a perfectly normal human that expressed a similar feeling back in the opening letters. To learn is to invite pain and loneliness. Well, what does that mean? Does Mary Shelley mean to tell us that knowledge is inherently evil? Is it better to remain ignorant of all things? Is it better to never know that the darkness even exists around you? Is the life of a fool, surrounded by fools, a happy one? An extension of this is language. The creature can finally express himself, but he's hidden from them. He's unable to share his thoughts. Communication is a huge component of society, and here he's been given the tools with no way to employ them. He discovers 3 books in the woods, all of which have coincidentally been foundational to the Romantic movement. The first is The Sorrows of Werther. It's a tale about a free-spirited lad that is driven to take his own life after being forced to conform to society's standards. Here's the creature's takeaway. As I read, however, I applied much personally to my own feelings and condition. I found myself similar, yet at the same time, strangely unlike to the beings concerning whom I read, and to whose conversation I was a listener. I sympathized with and partly understood them, but I was unformed in mind. I was dependent on none and related to none. The path of my departure was free, and there was none to lament my annihilation. My person was hideous, and my stature gigantic. What did this mean? Who was I? What was I? Whence did I come? What was my destination? These questions continually recurred, but I was unable to solve them. He sees himself in Werther and is painfully aware of the differences between them. It also ignites his deeper questions about his own nature. The next book is a volume of Plutarch's Lives, which presents more historical events, and it generates a concept of justice and truth in the creature. It also leads him to believe that anything written is 100% real. So this all leads to the most impactful work, Paradise Lost. Now, before I read the creature's impressions of this tale, it requires a little explanation. You see, it was written in the 1600s, so pretty close to the amount of time between now and the original Frankenstein novel that we're currently going over is how much time there was between then and Paradise Lost being released. It could be described as a biblical epic, essentially a book-length poem similar to the Odyssey or the Iliad, which, if you guys are interested, you can leave that in the comments, that those could be fun ones to cover. It is essentially, though, Paradise Lost is essentially Christian fan fiction. It uses the characters Lucifer, Adam, Eve, and others to tell a grand tale of the fall of man. Essentially looking at one chapter of a book in the Bible and extending it into a ridiculously thick book. It has been endlessly analyzed by scholars. There has been extensive discussion of the structure and intent of the poem. Writers such as C.S. Lewis noted the inherent evil of Satan, and how his actions and perspectives should be seen as inherently evil. Essentially, whatever Satan does or says is bad, which makes a ton of sense, especially since this was written so long ago. But the Romanticists, including Percy Shelley, saw Satan as a sympathetic character. The romantic ideals of freedom to follow one's natural inclinations fit Satan and his struggle with the hierarchy imposed on him by the Almighty. He's a tragic figure in combat with an undefeatable foe. Many romantic authors found themselves drawn to this depiction of Satan. The choice to feature Satan as a protagonist of sorts helped to create new perspectives and address questions about divine justice. While Milton was by no stretch considered heretical in his time, his work was for a time banned by the Pope. I could spend countless episodes diving into the themes presented by Paradise Lost, but for now, what matters is what the creature gleans from it. I read it, as I had read the other volumes which had fallen into my hands, as a true history. It moved every feeling of wonder and awe that the picture of an omnipotent God warring with his creatures was capable of exciting. I often referred the several situations as the similarity struck me to my own. Like Adam, I was apparently united by no link to any other being in existence, but his state was far different from mine in every other respect. He had come forth from the hands of God, a perfect creature, happy and prosperous, guarded by the special care of his Creator. He was allowed to converse with and acquire knowledge from beings of a superior nature, but I was wretched, helpless, and alone. Many times I considered Satan as the fitter emblem of my condition. For often, like him, when I viewed the bliss of my protectors, the bitter gall of envy rose within me. Identity. Identity is the core question the creature must answer. Even now, I have interchangeably referred to him as a creature and a monster. Creature, a created thing, very neutral. Monster, something horrid, usually attached to things that can destroy things or cookies. Victor never gave him a name. His creator never even assigned the most basic of identities, but here he has two distinct identities presented to him, and he sees parts of himself in each of them. Adam, a unique creation. Satan, a loathsome, lonely creature. This Adam-Satan dichotomy is only strengthened when he discovers papers in the coat he stole from Victor's lab. Papers that describe the creation of the creature. Hateful day when I received life, I exclaimed in agony. Accursed creator, why did you form a monster so hideous that even you turned from me in disgust? God, in pity, made man beautiful and alluring after his own image. But my form is a filthy type of yours, more horrid even from the very resemblance. Satan had his companions, fellow devils, to admire and encourage him, but I am solitary and abhorred. So even when comparing himself to Satan, he still recognizes that even he had friends. It's a brutal self-deprecation that helps to reveal more of his agony. But now winter again is approaching, and the creatures worked up the nerve to finally make contact with his cottagers. He waits until only the father remains too blind to see his hideous visage. And things go surprisingly well. Until Felix returns and beats the creature until he runs away. When next the monster observes the cottage has been deserted, and he discovers they plan to move. For the first time, the feelings of revenge and hatred filled my bosom, and I did not strive to control them, but allowing myself to be borne away by the stream, I bent my mind towards injury and death. When I thought of my friends, the mild voice of DeLacy, the gentle eyes of Agatha, and the exquisite beauty of the Arabian, these thoughts vanished, and a gush of tears somewhat soothed me. But again, when I reflected that they had spurned and deserted me, anger returned, a rage of anger, and unable to injure anything human, I turned my fury toward inanimate objects. As night advanced, I placed a variety of combustibles around the cottage, and after having destroyed every vestige of cultivation in the garden, I waited with forced impatience until the moon had sunk to commence my operations. He sets the entire cottage on fire. He might have overreacted a teensy bit. That said, there are two things to note here. The first is that relatively straightforward one, fire is being used as destruction. Still a symbol of knowledge, but here it's destroying. See, the source of all that he learned, the metaphorical flame, is now being consumed by true fire. Now that they know he exists, now he knows that they hate him, They cannot coexist, and destruction follows. The other thing to note is a question. The creature expresses an inordinate amount of rage. Does this rage come as a component of his unnatural existence, being opposed to life? Essentially, the two just cannot work. Is it design and destiny? Is it in his nature? Or was this just an example of what happens when an 8-foot-tall 2-year-old throws a tantrum? But he read all those philosophical books. Did they not teach him morality? Is simply learning enough for him to be held accountable for his actions? Furthermore, he destroyed the cottage but inflicted no violence directly on the humans. You know, just a light bit of arson. Anyway, he decides to visit his creator in Geneva, piecing the clues together from the notes and his geography lessons. Along the way, he sees a little girl slip and fall into a river. What do you think he does? What would you do? I rushed from my hiding place and with extreme labor from the force of the current saved her and dragged her to shore. She was senseless, and I endeavored by every means in my power to restore animation, when I was suddenly interrupted by the approach of a rustic, who was probably the person from whom she had playfully fled. On seeing me, he darted towards me, and tearing the girl from my arms, hastened toward the deeper parts of the wood. I followed speedily. I hardly knew why, but when the man saw me draw near, he aimed a gun, which he carried, at my body, and fired. I sank to the ground, and my injurer, with increased swiftness, escaped into the wood. So he decided to save her. But his good intentions don't mean much when the guy with a gun sees a giant man looming over a little girl. The creature, wounded physically and emotionally, internalizes his fury and continues his journey to Geneva until he finally takes a nap in the mountains. At this time, a slight sleep relieved me from the pain of reflection, which was disturbed by the approach of a beautiful child, who came running into the recess I had chosen with all the sportiveness of infancy. Suddenly, as I gazed on him, an idea seized me. This little creature was unprejudiced and had lived too short a time to have imbibed a horror of deformity. If, therefore, I could seize him and educate him as my companion and friend, I should not be so desolate in this people's earth. So the creature sees a child, and his first thought is to kidnap him. So this 8-foot-tall monster seizes the boy. He struggled violently. "Let me go," he cried. "Monster, ugly wretch, you wish to eat me and tear me to pieces. You are an ogre. Let me go, or I will tell my papa." "Boy, you will never see your father again. You must come with me." "Hideous monster, let me go. My papa is a syndic. He is Frankenstein. He will punish you. You dare not keep me." "Frankenstein, you belong then to my enemy, to him towards whom I have sworn eternal revenge. You shall be my first victim." The child struggled and loaded me with epithets which carried despair to my heart. I grasped his throat to silence him, and in a moment he lay dead at my feet. And thus William is dead. The question posed to us 2 episodes ago is finally answered. The creature wanted a friend, and somehow that led to kidnapping and homicide. The crimes don't stop there. You see, he spots the locket and again, moved by beauty, steals it and then flees to a barn to hide. A woman was sleeping on some straw. She was young, not indeed so beautiful as her whose portrait I held, but of an agreeable aspect and bloom in the loveliness of youth and health. Here, I thought, is one of those whose joy-imparting smiles are bestowed on all but me. Then I bent over her and whispered, "Awake, fairest. Thy lover is near. He who would give his life but to obtain one look of affection from thine eyes. My beloved, awake." So he spots Justine sleeping and runs away before she wakes up. That is to say, he also leaves the locket in her pocket so that she, a beautiful woman, will receive his punishment. At last, we understand the entirety of what transpired, leaving us with only one question. What is the creature's request? Remember, when he first met Frankenstein on top of the mountain, the creature said, I have a request. Let's find out what it is right now. We may not part until you have promised to comply with my requisition. I am alone and miserable. Man will not associate with me. But one as deformed and horrible as myself would not deny herself to me. My companion must be of the same species and have the same defects. This being you must create. He wants an Eve. The creature wants a companion, to no longer be alone. As we close out this episode, I present another question. Would you create a wife for the monster? Why or why not? What do you think Victor will do? Well, I suppose we'll know in the next episode, where we will cover chapters 17 through 22. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to watch Del Toro's rendition of Frankenstein. I'm curious what elements will be the same. Thank you for watching, and until next time, Carpe Diem.